You wake up shivering in the pitch black, flea-bitten and aching on a hard wooden bench, surrounded by the stench of unwashed nights in a drafty medieval castle. No cozy bed, no hot shower, no coffee, just a cold, brutal world where your next battle could be your last. Step into the muddy boots of Sir William De Valognes, a 13th century knight, and discover the gritty, bone-wearying reality of chivalry, far from the fairy tale glory. Ready to survive a day in his armor? Let's dive into the raw, unromantic truth of medieval life. You think medieval knights were all about rescuing damsels, winning jousting tournaments, and slaying dragons while wearing spotless armor? Let me paint you a more realistic picture. Imagine waking up covered in flea bites, your back aching from sleeping on a hard wooden bench shared with 3 other men, all stinking from not bathing in months. Your breath reeks, your teeth are rotting, and you've got about 14 hours of mind-numbing religious services, brutal training, and political maneuvering ahead of you. Oh, and if you're lucky, you might get to die painfully from an infected wound while caked in your own excrement on a battlefield hundreds of miles from home. Welcome to the glamorous life of a real medieval knight in England. Let's see how long you survive. But first, get comfortable. Seriously, adjust those pillows. Pull up that blanket because where we're going, you're going to want to be cozy. The first thing you notice is the cold. Not the gentle chill of a modern bedroom with the window cracked open, but the bone-deep damp cold that seeps into every fiber of your being. Your eyes snap open to darkness. Complete utter darkness. Not the artificial darkness of blackout curtains with street lights peeking through, but the absolute absence of light that was normal in the 13th century before electricity, before gas lamps, before anything but fire to push back against the night. You're lying on something hard, really hard. And it's not even a proper bed. It's a wooden platform raised slightly off the floor of what you'll soon discover is the Great Hall of Pembroke Castle. The year is 1283, and you've somehow woken up as Sir William De Valognes, a knight in service to King Edward I of England. God's teeth, William, cease your infernal groaning, comes a voice from somewhere to your right. Another night, you realize sleeping on the same massive platform. Unlike your plush private bedroom with its memory foam mattress, medieval knights often slept communally in the castle's great hall. Privacy. That's a luxury not yet invented. You sit up disoriented and feel something crawling on your skin. Actually, multiple somethings. Unlike your cozy, clean bed at home, your sleeping platform is infested with fleas, lice, and bed bugs that feast on you nightly. Knights didn't change their bedding for months at a time. And the straw-stuffed mattress you're lying on is a breeding ground for all manner of creatures. You're on duty for prime today, the voice mutters. The chaplain will have your hide if you're late again. Prime, the first prayer service of the day held around 6 a.m., which means it's probably about 5:30 now, though precise timekeeping isn't exactly a thing yet. There are no alarm clocks, no smartphones, no digital displays. Time is marked by church bells and the position of the sun. And right now, pre-dawn, you're expected to be up and preparing for the day. Wait, hang on. I know what you're thinking. I'm a badass knight. I should be mounting my trusty steed and riding off to save a damsel or something, right? Yeah. No, let's get real for a second. First, you need to pee. And there's no bathroom, no toilet, not even an outhouse nearby. In a castle like Pembroke, you'd probably use a garderobe. Basically, a hole in the wall that drops your waist down the castle exterior. But since you're in the Great Hall and it's freezing outside, many knights would simply use a chamber pot and have a servant empty it later. If they were feeling particularly lazy or drunk from the night before, they might just find a dark corner. William, get up you lazy sot. The bells for matins have already rung. Another voice harsher this time. Oh, right. In medieval England, knights weren't just warriors. They were deeply religious. Your daily schedule revolves around the canonical hours of prayer. Matins, lauds, prime, terce, sext, none, vespers, and compline. That's 8 prayer services a day, starting in the middle of the night and ending just before bed. Hope you're not an atheist because your life is now utterly dominated by religious observance. You stumble to your feet, wincing at the pain in your back. Unlike your ergonomic mattress, sleeping on wood with minimal padding has left you stiff and sore. And that's before a day of wearing heavy armor and training with weapons. The Great Hall is beginning to stir around you. Other knights, squires, and servants are rising. There's no privacy as you dress. The concept barely exists in medieval England. Your wardrobe is also considerably simpler than the closet full of clothes you're used to. You'll wear the same linen undergarments called brays, basically medieval underwear, for days, maybe weeks. Over that goes a linen shirt, then a wool tunic and hose for your legs tied to your brays with strings. My lord, your water. A young boy, your page, appears with a small bowl of water. This is your morning bath. A chance to splash your face and hands. Full immersion bathing is rare. Maybe once a month if you're particularly hygienic by medieval standards. Most knights went weeks or months without a proper bath. The smell in the hall is potent. Thought you'd lie abed all day, did you? The knight next to you is up now. A burly man with a scar across his cheek. Sir Roland, your brain somehow supplies. After your performance in yesterday's training, I'd think you'd be eager to redeem yourself. Your stomach growls, reminding you that you haven't eaten. Breakfast isn't a formal meal in medieval England, especially not for knights who often practice an intermittent fasting schedule without realizing it. You might grab some bread and ale before heading to prime, but a proper meal won't come until after training, closer to midday. The bread, when you find it, isn't the fluffy sliced stuff you're used to. It's a dense, coarse loaf, often several days old, and it might have got a fungus that grows on rye and can cause hallucinations if consumed in large quantities. But you're hungry, so you chew the tough bread and wash it down with small beer. A weak, slightly alcoholic beverage that's safer to drink than water. Come on, Sir Roland says, clapping you on the shoulder hard enough to make you wince. Let's go praise God and beg his forgiveness for whatever sins you committed last night. You follow the stream of knights and castle residents to the chapel. The stone floor is ice-cold beneath your thin-soled leather shoes. Unlike your cushioned, waterproof modern footwear, medieval shoes offer minimal protection from the elements, and the castle is drafty with wind whistling through arrow slits and around doorways. Central heating is centuries away. In the chapel, you kneel on the hard stone floor. There are no comfortable pews, no cushions. Your knees ache after just a few minutes, but the service will last much longer. The prayers are in Latin, which you barely understand, but you mumble along with the others, crossing yourself when they do. Your mind wanders. What will today bring? Training, certainly. Perhaps administrative duties. Knights weren't just warriors, but also managers of estates and enforcers of the king's law. Maybe a hunt if you're lucky, but also hours of religious observance, political maneuvering, and the constant awareness that your position depends entirely on your usefulness to your lord. And deliver us from evil, the chaplain intones, bringing you back to the present. The prayer service is ending, and your real day is about to begin. Outside, the sky is lightening to a dull gray. It's going to rain. You can feel it in the air, but training won't be cancelled for a little thing like weather. In fact, your instructor probably sees it as an opportunity to make your life even more miserable. Sir William, a voice calls as you exit the chapel. It's Sir Geoffrey, the castle's marshal, and your direct superior. The Earl wants to see you before training. Your stomach drops. The Earl of Pembroke is not someone to be kept waiting, and a private summons could mean anything from a special assignment to punishment for some perceived slight. The politics of a medieval castle are complex and treacherous, with alliances shifting like sand. One wrong word, one misinterpreted gesture, and you could find yourself stripped of your position, or worse. As you make your way to the Earl's private chamber, you pass servants preparing the great hall for the day. They're clearing away the sleeping platforms, setting up trestle tables for meals, sweeping the rush-strewn floor. The rushes, dried grasses, and herbs scattered on the floor are changed infrequently, and they hide a multitude of sins. Food scraps, dog feces, yes, dogs roamed freely in medieval castles, spit, and worse. The herbs are supposed to mask the smell. They don't. You pass through corridors that are narrow and dark, lit only by occasional arrow slits that let in meager light. The stone walls weep moisture in the damp English climate. It's cold, always cold. Even in summer, the massive stone walls that protect you from enemies also block the sun's warmth. And in winter, it's practically unbearable. Speaking of unbearable, let's talk about your teeth for a second. That dull ache in your jaw, that's a cavity. There's no dentistry as you know it in medieval England. If the pain gets bad enough, you might have the tooth pulled by the castle's barber. The same guy who cuts your hair and performs bloodletting when you're ill. No anesthesia, just a strong drink beforehand if you're lucky. Oh, and your breath terrible. Everyone's dental hygiene consists of maybe rubbing your teeth with a cloth or using a twig as a toothbrush if you're particularly fastidious. Toothpaste? Nope. Mouthwash. Dream on. You arrive at the Earl's chamber and knock respectfully. A servant opens the door and you step into a room that by medieval standards is luxurious. There's a proper bed with curtains for privacy and warmth. Tapestries hang on the walls, both for decoration and insulation against the cold. A fire burns in a central hearth, the smoke rising to a hole in the ceiling. The Earl himself sits at a table examining documents. He's middle-aged, battle-hardened, and not known for his patience. "Ah, Sir William," he says, not looking up. "Good of you to join us." "Us?" You glance around and notice two other men in the room. One wears the robes of a clerk or scribe, the other the distinctive garb of a royal messenger. "Your lordship," you reply, bowing deeply. The proper forms of address and protocol are critical in medieval society. One wrong move could be interpreted as disrespect with serious consequences. The king requires more men for his campaign in Wales. The Earl says without preamble. You will lead a contingent of 20 men-at-arms to join the royal forces at Chester. You leave in 3 days. Your heart sinks. A campaign in Wales means weeks, possibly months away from the relative comfort of the castle. It means marching through hostile territory, facing not just enemy soldiers, but disease, exposure, and starvation. Medieval warfare isn't the glamorous affair depicted in movies. It's brutal, dirty, and often pointless, with more men dying from dysentery than enemy action. "Of course, my lord," you say, because refusal isn't an option. Your entire existence as a knight is predicated on service to your liege. "I am honored by His Majesty's command." The Earl nods dismissively. "See the steward for supplies and make sure your men are ready. I won't have Pembroke's reputation tarnished by ill-prepared troops." You bow again and back out of the room. Mind racing. 3 days to prepare for a campaign. 3 days to ensure 20 men are equipped, trained, and ready to march. 3 days to put your own affairs in order. Speaking of your affairs, did I mention you're married? Most knights were often for political or financial advantage rather than love. Your wife, Lady Eleanor, manages your small estate while you're at court or on campaign. You see her perhaps a few months out of the year. If you die in Wales, she'll receive word weeks or months later and then face the struggle of maintaining the estate without you. But now you have more immediate concerns, like not dying in training before you even leave for Wales. You make your way to the training yard, where other knights and men-at-arms are already gathering. The rain has started. A cold drizzle that seeps through your clothing. There's no such thing as waterproof fabric yet. Once you're wet, you stay wet, maybe for days. "William," Sir Roland calls, waving you over. "Heard the news. Wales, eh? Rather you than me, friend." You force a smile. The king's service is an honor. Roland snorts. "Aye, so they say, an honor that might cost you your head." He hands you a practice sword made of wood, but weighted to simulate the real thing. "Come on, let's see if we can at least make sure you don't die in the first charge." The practice sword feels heavy in your hand. Unlike the lightweight, balanced weapons of modern sport fencing, a medieval sword is a substantial piece of steel designed to cut through armor and flesh. Even the practice version makes your arm ache after a few minutes. Guard up. Roland barks and swings his own practice sword at your head. You barely get your weapon up in time to block. And the impact jars your arm to the shoulder. This isn't choreographed stage fighting. It's brutal, efficient, and deadly serious. Knights train to kill, not to look good doing it. For the next hour, you and Roland trade blows in the rain-soaked yard. Your muscles scream in protest. Despite what movies might show, wearing armor and swinging a sword all day is exhausting work. A knight needed to be incredibly fit with strength and endurance built through years of training. By the time the bell rings for the next prayer service, terse around 9 a.m., you're drenched in sweat despite the cold. Your arms feel like lead, and you've collected an impressive array of bruises. Roland didn't hold back, and neither did the other knights you sparred with. In 3 days, your lives may depend on each other's skills. The rain has intensified, turning the training yard to mud. Your shoes and the hem of your tunic are caked with it. Unlike your machine-washable modern clothes, these garments will be difficult to clean, and you don't have many spares. Most medieval people, even knights, own just 2 or 3 sets of clothing for everyday wear. As you make your way back to the chapel for terce, you catch a glimpse of yourself in a puddle. Your face is leaner than you're used to, weathered by sun and wind. Medieval nutrition was lacking in many ways. Fresh fruit and vegetables were seasonal and limited, and protein was often scarce for all but the wealthiest. Even as a knight, your diet consists largely of bread, pottage, a thick stew of whatever vegetables are available, and meat on special occasions. Sir William, a young voice calls. It's your squire, Thomas, a boy of about 14. Every knight had at least one squire, a young man training to become a knight himself. Thomas serves you, learns from you, and in return, you teach him the skills he'll need. Sir Geoffrey says, you're to select the men for Wales today. You nod wearily. Another responsibility. The men-at-arms under your command aren't knights, but professional soldiers who form the backbone of medieval armies. Some are career warriors. Others are serving for a set term as part of their feudal obligations. All look to you for leadership, and their lives will be in your hands in Wales. Thomas falls into step beside you. Is it true we're to fight Llewellyn ap Griffith's forces? They say he has mountain demons fighting for him. You almost smile at the boy's credulity. Superstition runs rampant in medieval society, with natural phenomena often attributed to supernatural causes. Disease is caused by bad air or divine punishment. Crop failures are the work of witches, and enemy forces always have demons, giants, or other fantastical allies. No demons, Thomas, you say. Just men fighting for their homes. The boy looks disappointed. But Sir Roland says many things, you interrupt, especially after his 3rd cup of wine. You reach the chapel just as the bell finishes ringing, more kneeling on stone, more Latin prayers you barely understand. Your knees and back protest, but appearances matter. A knight is expected to be devout, or at least to appear so. After terce comes more training, this time mounted. Your warhorse, a massive, powerful animal bred for battle, is brought to the stable yard. Unlike the elegant, high-strung racehorses of modern times, a medieval destrier is more like a draft horse, strong, steady, and trained to be fearless in battle. And speaking of battle, that's something else the movies get wrong. Knights didn't spend most of their time fighting. They trained for it certainly, but actual battles were relatively rare. Most of your duties involve administration, law enforcement, and maintaining order. War is expensive and disruptive, and most lords prefer to resolve disputes through negotiation, marriage alliances, or legal means. But when diplomacy fails, you earn your keep through violence. You haul yourself into the saddle, wincing as your already sore muscles protest. The rain continues to fall, and your horse's hooves throw up clouds of mud with each step. You'll spend hours practicing maneuvers, lance work, and mounted combat. By the end, every part of your body will ache. Sir William, Thomas calls, running across the yard with something in his arms. Your mail, sir. Ah, yes. Armor. For mounted training, you'll wear your mail hauberk, a long shirt made of interlocked metal rings. It weighs about 30 pounds and distributes that weight across your shoulders and upper body. By the end of a day's training, those 30 pounds feel like 300. Thomas helps you don the hauberk over your padded gambeson, a thick quilted garment that provides both insulation and protection against the chafing of the mail. Even with assistance, it's an awkward process. No wonder knights needed squires. It's nearly impossible to arm yourself properly alone. The weight settles on your shoulders, and you adjust your stance in the saddle to compensate. Your horse, accustomed to the additional burden, stands patiently. This is just practice weight. In actual battle, you'd wear additional protection. A mail coif for your head and neck, gauntlets for your hands, and perhaps plate armor for your limbs, depending on the period and your wealth. Sir Geoffrey rides into the yard, already armored, lance in hand. "Form up," he shouts. "We practice charges today." You take your place in line with the other knights. The lance you're handed is 14 feet of solid ash tipped with a blunt practice head for training. It's heavy and unwieldy, designed to deliver massive force in a charge. Remember, Geoffrey calls, control your mount with your legs. Keep your eye on the target. Lance steady. One by one, the knights charge down the field, aiming their lances at quintons, rotating targets that swing around to hit an unprepared knight in the back if struck off-center. It's a humiliating but effective training tool. Your turn comes. You nudge your horse forward, then squeeze with your legs to signal a charge. The destrier responds immediately, surging from a walk to a gallop in seconds. The ground thunders beneath its hooves. You couch the lance under your arm, sighting along its length at the quinton. The rain blurs your vision. Your armor weighs you down. Every hoofbeat jars your already aching body. But this moment of speed and power and precision. This is what you trained for. This is what makes a knight more than just a man with a sword. This perfect harmony of rider, horse, and weapon honed through years of practice. You strike the quinton dead center. The impact traveling up the lance and into your shoulder, but your aim was true, and the target spins harmlessly as you thunder past. Well struck, Geoffrey calls as you wheel your mount around again with shields this time. And so it goes. Hour after hour in the rain and mud, charge after charge, drill after drill. By the time the bell rings for sext, the midday prayer, you're exhausted, soaked, and filthy. You dismount with difficulty, your legs stiff from hours in the saddle. Thomas takes your horse's reins, leading the animal away to be rubbed down and fed. You strip off your mail, wincing as the movement pulls at strained muscles. "Good work today," Sir Roland says, clapping you on the shoulder as you walk toward the chapel together. "Might make a proper knight of you yet." You manage a tired smile. Just in time to die gloriously in Wales. Roland laughs. "That's the spirit. Die gloriously and they'll sing songs about you. Die ignobly of camp fever and no one remembers your name." It's grim humor but typical of knights. Death is a constant companion in medieval life. The average life expectancy is around 30 years. Though if you survive childhood you might make it to 50 or beyond. But a knight's profession is particularly dangerous, and not just from enemy weapons. Disease, infection, accidents, all claim their share of lives. In the chapel, once more, you kneel on stones that seem harder with each service. Your stomach growls audibly, earning you a disapproving glance from the chaplain. After sext comes dinner, the main meal of the medieval day, eaten around noon. The great hall has been transformed from sleeping quarters to dining space. Long trestle tables run its length with benches for seating. The high table, where the earl and honored guests sit, is on a raised dais at one end. As a knight, you have a place of some honor, though not at the high table itself. You sit with the other knights and higher-ranking servants above the salt. Literally, a large salt cellar marks the division between higher and lower status diners. Food is served communally with two people sharing a trencher. A thick slice of stale bread that serves as both plate and edible utensil. You use your personal knife to cut meat and spear other foods. Forks won't become common for centuries yet. The meal itself is simple but filling. More bread pottage with beans and root vegetables. And today being Wednesday, fish rather than meat in observance of religious dietary restrictions. You drink more small beer or perhaps wine if you're lucky. Water is generally avoided as potentially unsafe. As you eat, the conversation around you centers on the upcoming campaign in Wales. Rumors fly. The Welsh have thousands of men. They know the mountains like no Englishman ever could. They practice dark magic. Some of it is superstition, but some holds truth. The Welsh are fighting on their home ground with intimate knowledge of the terrain. It will be a difficult campaign. They say the king is building castles all along the Welsh border, says a knight to your left. Stone monsters to tame the wild Welsh. I agrees another, and will man them, no doubt. Stuck in some godforsaken outpost for years. It's a valid concern. Edward I is indeed embarking on a massive castle building program to secure his conquest of Wales, and knights like you will garrison those castles far from home and comfort. As the meal winds down, you have a brief respite before none. The mid-afternoon prayer service, you use the time to begin selecting the men who will accompany you to Wales. It's a grim task knowing that some of those you choose won't return. Thomas finds you in the armory where you're inspecting equipment. Sir William, Lady Eleanor has arrived at the castle. You look up, surprised. Your wife wasn't expected for another week. Her early arrival can't be coincidence. She must have heard about the Welsh campaign. Where is she? You ask, setting aside the male coif you were examining in the solar, sir, with the other ladies. The solar is one of the few relatively private spaces in a medieval castle, a room where the lady of the castle and her attendants can withdraw from the constant bustle of the great hall. It's also typically one of the warmest rooms, hence the name. You make your way there, stopping first to wash your hands and face. Your relationship with Eleanor is complicated, as many medieval marriages were. You married for alliance and property, not love, though affection has grown between you over the years, and now you must tell her you're leaving again, possibly to die in a foreign land. The solar is indeed warmer than the rest of the castle, with a fire burning in the hearth and tapestries covering the walls. Eleanor sits with several other ladies working on embroidery. At 30, she's still beautiful, though childbirth and the hardships of medieval life have left their mark. She looks up as you enter, her expression unreadable. Husband, she says, setting aside her work and rising to greet you. I see you are well, my lady, you reply, taking her hands and kissing her cheek. Even between husband and wife, certain formalities are observed, especially in public. Your journey was safe. Safe enough, she says, though the road's a little better than mud tracks after the rain. There's an awkward pause. The other ladies continue their work, pretending not to listen while missing nothing. I've heard about Wales, Eleanor says finally, her voice low. 3 days, they say. You nod. The king's command. Her mouth tightens, but she doesn't protest. What would be the point? The king's will is law, and a knight's duty is to obey. Instead, she asks practical questions. How many men? What supplies? How long does the campaign expect to last? These are not idle inquiries. In your absence, Eleanor will manage not just the household, but all your affairs. Medieval noble women were far from the helpless damsels of romantic tales. They were administrators, managers, sometimes even defenders of their estates. The bell for none interrupts your conversation. We'll speak more tonight, you promise, and Eleanor nods, returning to her embroidery as you leave for the chapel. More prayers, more kneeling on stone, then back to preparations for Wales. The afternoon passes in a blur of equipment checks, roster reviews, and consultations with the castle steward about supplies. As the sun begins to set early in the English autumn, the bell rings for vespers, the evening prayer service. By now, your knees are bruised from hours on stone floors, your back aches from training and the weight of armor, and your head throbs with the thousand details that must be addressed before you march. After vespers comes supper, a lighter meal than dinner. More bread, more pottage, perhaps some cheese or cold meat left from dinner. The great hall is dimmer now, lit by rushlights and candles. Both expensive, both producing more smoke than illumination. The smoke mingles with that from the central hearth, creating a thick haze that stings your eyes and coats your lungs. You eat quickly, eager to finish the day's business, and perhaps find a few hours of rest before it all begins again tomorrow. But as you rise from the table, Sir Geoffrey motions you over. The Earl wishes to review the men you've selected, he says in his chamber. After Compline, you suppress a sigh. Compline. The final prayer service of the day won't end until well after dark. Another late night, then in a succession of late nights. The hours between supper and Compline are filled with more preparations. You meet with the castle armorer about equipment repairs, consult with the stable master about horses for the journey, and finally snatch a brief moment with Eleanor. You find her in your shared chamber. A small room allocated to you as a married knight. It's sparsely furnished. A bed, a chest for clothing, a small table and stool. Luxury by medieval standards, offering the rare privilege of privacy. Eleanor is preparing for bed. Her maid helping her out of her gown. Medieval night clothes are simple, often just a linen shift or nothing at all. The bed itself has curtains that can be drawn for warmth and privacy. Leave us, you tell the maid who curtsies and departs. Alone with your wife. Some of the formality drops away. I didn't expect you until next week, you say, sitting on the edge of the bed. Eleanor shrugs, her shift whispering against her skin. I heard rumors at home, knights gathering, supplies being readied. It wasn't hard to guess what was coming. You sigh, running a hand through your hair. I would have sent word, would you? She sits beside you, her shoulder touching yours. Or would I have received a messenger after you were already gone? There's no good answer. Campaigns are often called suddenly with little time for personal goodbyes. It's one of the many hardships of a knight's wife. How long? She asks. I don't know, you admit. Weeks? Months? Perhaps? She nods, accepting this as she has accepted so many absences before. The winter store of grain is laid in, she says. The new roof on the west barn is finished. The steward thinks we'll have enough to pay the king's tax this year, but only just. This is her way of telling you that she has matters well in hand, that she can manage while you're gone. It's both reassuring and humbling. In many ways, her job is harder than yours. The constant unglamorous work of keeping an estate functioning day after day, year after year. The bell rings for Compline, interrupting whatever you might have said next. I must go, you say, standing reluctantly. Eleanor nods. And after the Earl? Yes. Don't wait up for me. She smiles slightly. I never do. You touch her cheek briefly, then head for the chapel one last time today. Compline is mercifully shorter than some of the other services, but by the time it ends, you're swaying on your feet from exhaustion. Still, duty calls. You make your way to the Earl's chamber, where he and Sir Geoffrey are waiting. For the next hour, you review the list of men selected for Wales, discussing each one's strengths and weaknesses. The Earl makes a few changes, replacing men he wants to keep at Pembroke with others you're less familiar with. You hide your frustration. These men's lives will be in your hands, and you would prefer to know them well. Finally, the Earl dismisses you. It's well past the time when most in the castle have gone to bed. The corridors are dark, lit only by the occasional wool torch. You make your way carefully back to your chamber. Eleanor is asleep or pretending to be. You undress quietly, placing your clothes in the chest where they'll wait to be washed, an infrequent event in medieval England, where water had to be hauled from wells or rivers and heated over fires. You slide into bed beside your wife, wincing as your bruised body meets the hard mattress. Unlike your plush modern bed, this one is stuffed with straw or wool, lumpy and often damp in England's humid climate. The linens are rough against your skin, and the wool blankets itch, but you're too tired to care. Your eyes close almost immediately, your body surrendering to exhaustion. Tomorrow will bring more prayers, more training, more preparations, and in 3 days, the march to Wales with all its dangers and hardships. As you drift off to sleep, you can't help but wonder, will you survive to see Pembroke again? Or will you become just another knight who died in service to his king? Your name forgotten except by those who loved you. In your modern bed, warm and safe, you shift position, grateful for the comfort medieval knights could only dream of. The daily struggles they faced, the cold, the hunger, the disease, the violence, are mercifully distant from your experience. Sleep comes for you, as it came for Sir William over 7 centuries ago. But unlike him, you can be reasonably certain of waking to another day of peace and relative comfort. He had no such assurance. Every night might have been his last in a world where danger lurked around every corner. Perhaps the knowledge, the precariousness of existence, gave each day a sharpness, an intensity we can barely imagine in our safer, more comfortable times. Or perhaps it was simply exhausting, a constant weight that never fully lifted. Either way, as you drift deeper into sleep, you might find yourself grateful that you woke up in your own bed, in your own time, and not as a knight in medieval England. Morning comes too soon, announced by the tolling of the bell for matins. You open your eyes to darkness again, momentarily disoriented. The weight next to you is Eleanor, not your memory foam pillow. The air is damp and cold, not the climate-controlled comfort of your modern bedroom. Dawn is still hours away, but duty calls. You ease out of bed, trying not to wake Eleanor, though she stirs anyway. Already, she murmurs, her voice thick with sleep. Always, you reply, fumbling for your clothing in the dark. This is day 2 of your 3 days before marching to Wales. Every moment counts, and today will be even more grueling than yesterday. You need to not just select men, but train with them. Assess their readiness and begin forging them into a cohesive unit. Thomas appears at your door with a small lamp, its feeble light barely pushing back the darkness. Sir William, he whispers, careful not to disturb Lady Eleanor too much. Sir Geoffrey says to meet him in the armory after matins. You nod, pulling on your tunic. Another day begins, much like the last, in prayer and preparation. The armory is cold and dark, lit only by a few rush lights. Sir Geoffrey is already there examining a sword by the meager light. William, he acknowledges without looking up. Your men need to be combat ready before you leave. The Welsh won't give you time to train once you cross the border. I know, you say, running a hand through your hair. We'll work them hard today. Geoffrey finally looks up, his face shadowed by the flickering light. Not just hard, to breaking. I want to know which ones will shatter before you're a 100 miles from here. You understand his logic better to discover weaknesses now in training than in battle, where lives depend on each man doing his duty. But it means a day of pushing men to their absolute limits and yourself along with them. The yard after prime, Geoffrey says, returning to his inspection of the sword. Bring them armored and ready. Prime is the first daylight prayer service held around 6 a.m. It means you have just a few hours to gather your men, ensure they're properly equipped, and prepare them for what promises to be a brutal day of training. You leave the armory and head straight to the barracks where the men at arms sleep. Unlike knights who might have private chambers or sleep in the Great Hall, common soldiers are housed in long narrow buildings with rows of pallets on the floor. The smell hits you as soon as you enter. Sweat, unwashed bodies, and the distinctive odor of men who live in close quarters with limited sanitation. On your feet, you call, your voice echoing in the enclosed space. Full armor in the yard after prime. Anyone late answers to me personally. Groans and curses greet your announcement, but men begin stirring, reaching for clothing and equipment. You don't wait to see more. Moving on to the next barracks to deliver the same message. By the time you reach the chapel for matins, you've visited all 4 barracks housing the men selected for the Welsh campaign. 20 men in total, a small force, but one that will join with others at Chester to form a more substantial army. The pre-dawn prayer service passes in a blur of Latin chanting and uncomfortable kneeling. Your mind is elsewhere, mentally reviewing each man's strengths and weaknesses, planning the day's training scenarios, calculating what supplies you'll need for the march. After matins, there's just enough time to break your fast with bread and ale before prime. You eat standing in the kitchen, too busy to sit. The cook, used to nights with urgent duties, hands you an extra chunk of bread for later. You tuck it inside your tunic. Medieval pockets being yet another convenience centuries in the future. The bell for prime rings just as the first hint of dawn lightens the eastern sky. More prayers, more kneeling. Your knees are developing calluses from hours on stone floors. A badge of devotion worn by many medieval religious. Finally, you're free to begin the day's real work. You stride to the training yard where your men are already gathering. Some are fully armored as ordered. Others are still struggling with buckles and straps. Form up, you shout, and the men scramble into rough lines. They're a mixed group. Some veterans of previous campaigns, others barely more than boys on their first military service. All look tired and cold in the grey dawnlight. You pace before them, assessing each man with a critical eye. "In 3 days we march for Wales," you say, your voice carrying across the yard. "In 10, we may face battle. I need to know now which of you I can trust with my life, and which of you will break when the arrows start flying." A murmur runs through the ranks. They know what's coming. "Sir Roland will work with the archers," you continue, nodding to Roland, who stands nearby. "Sir Geoffrey will take the pikemen. I'll work with the swordsmen. By midday, you'll all wish you were back in your beds. By evening, you'll wish you'd never been born." This isn't idle threat or motivational exaggeration. Medieval training was brutally effective because it had to be. Men who weren't prepared died and often took their comrades with them. "Begin," you command, and the men break into their assigned groups. The swordsmen gather around you. 8 men of varying ages and experience. You draw your own sword, the metal catching the first real light of day. "Pair up," you order. "Show me what you know." For the next hour, you observe as the men spar with blunted practice swords. Some show decent technique, others rely on brute strength over skill. You correct stances, demonstrate proper guards, and occasionally step in to spar directly with a man who needs particular attention. "No, like this," you say, guiding a young soldier's arm into proper position. "Lead with your shield, not your sword. The shield keeps you alive. The sword makes the other man dead." Medieval combat wasn't about fair fights or honor. It was about surviving and killing your enemy by whatever means necessary. A knight might follow certain codes of conduct when fighting other knights, but against common soldiers or in the chaos of battle, such niceties were quickly abandoned. The sun climbs higher, burning off some of the morning chill, but bringing little real warmth. Your men are sweating despite the cool air, their breath forming clouds in front of their faces. Chain mail and gambeson are hot, heavy, and constricting even in cold weather. "Water break," you call eventually, and the men gratefully lower their weapons. Pages appear with buckets and ladles offering drinks to the thirsty soldiers. While they rest, you confer with Roland and Geoffrey, comparing notes on the men's performance. Geoffrey is particularly dissatisfied with the pikemen's discipline. They break formation the moment pressure is applied. He complains the Welsh will cut through them like butter. "Work them harder," you suggest. Run drills until they hold their line from pure muscle memory. Geoffrey nods grimly. "That's the plan." "And you?" Some of the swordsmen show promise. Others, you shrug. "We have 3 days." Roland laughs, though there's little humor in it. 3 days to turn farmers into soldiers. Good luck with that. It's a common challenge. Many men-at-arms were indeed farmers or tradesmen, serving their feudal obligation rather than professional soldiers. They might train occasionally throughout the year, but their primary skills lay elsewhere. Only in times of war were they called to full-time military service. "Water breaks over," you call, and the men reluctantly return to formation. Now we work on shield walls. When the Welsh come at you with spears and arrows, this is what keeps you breathing. For the next several hours, you drill the men relentlessly. Shield wall formations, breaking and reforming ranks, fighting while maintaining formation. The work is exhausting both physically and mentally. By the time the bell rings for sext, the midday prayer, every man is drenched in sweat and trembling with fatigue. But there's no real rest. After a hurried prayer service, it's back to the yard for more training. This time, you focus on individual combat skills, working man by man to identify and address weaknesses. "Hold your shield higher," you tell one soldier, a stocky man named John. "You're leaving your neck exposed." To demonstrate, you tap his throat with your practice sword gently, but enough to make the point. In real combat, he'd already be dead. John adjusts his shield, his arms visibly shaking from hours of holding the heavy wooden and metal construction. Medieval shields weren't light. A typical heater shield could weigh 8 to 10 pounds, and larger kite shields even more. Add that to 25 to 30 pounds of mail armor, and even the strongest men fatigue quickly. Again, you order an attack with controlled but forceful blows. This time, John's defense holds. Better, you acknowledge. Now counterattack. Don't just defend. Kill me before I kill you. John lunges forward, his practice sword swinging in a powerful arc. You parry easily, but nod in approval. Good. Aggressive. Keep that spirit when the real fighting starts. And so it continues. Hour after hour, the sun arcs across the sky, offering little warmth through the persistent cloud cover. Your body aches from continuous exertion, and your throat is raw from shouting commands, but you push on because men's lives, including your own, depend on this training. Sir William, a voice calls from across the yard. You look up to see Thomas running toward you, his young face flushed with excitement. The Earl wishes to see you and Sir Geoffrey immediately. You nod, turning to the exhausted swordsman. Continue practicing the sequences I showed you. I'll return shortly. As you cross the yard with Thomas, you ask, did he say what this is about? The boy shakes his head. No, sir, but a royal messenger arrived an hour ago, riding hard from Chester. Your stomach tightens. News from Chester could mean changes to the campaign plans, perhaps even an acceleration of your departure date. The Earl's chamber is crowded when you arrive. Sir Geoffrey is already there along with the castle steward, the captain of the guard, and several other knights. The Earl himself stands at a table spread with maps, his expression grim. Sir William, he says as you enter. Good. We have news from the north. My lord, you acknowledge, taking your place at the table. The Earl gestures to a man in mud-splattered traveling clothes. The royal messenger. Tell Sir William what you told me. The messenger clears his throat. The Welsh have moved sooner than expected. They've raided across the border near Oswestry, burning several villages and ambushing a supply train bound for Chester. Murmurs run through the assembled men. This changes everything. The king commands all forces to muster at Chester within the week, the messenger continues. Any delay could prove disastrous. The Earl looks at you and Geoffrey. You understand what this means? It's not a question. Your departure plan for 3 days hence must now happen immediately tomorrow at the latest. We'll be ready, my lord, Geoffrey says firmly. You nod in agreement, though inwardly you're calculating the enormous challenges this presents. Your men aren't fully trained. Supplies aren't completely gathered. Equipment repairs are still underway. But none of that matters now. The king commands and you obey. William, your men will depart at first light tomorrow, the Earl decides. Geoffrey, yours will follow the day after. We can't strip Pembroke of all its defenders at once. Yes, my lord, you both respond. Dismissed. Make your preparations. You leave the chamber with your mind racing. So much to do in so little time. The men must be informed, equipment checked, supplies gathered, marching orders drafted, and somewhere in all of that, you need to say goodbye to Eleanor. Thomas is waiting outside. Bad news, sir, he asks, noting your expression. We march tomorrow, you tell him. Find Sir Roland. Tell him to gather the men in the Great Hall immediately. The boy's eyes widen, but he doesn't waste time on questions. He dashes off to follow your orders, leaving you to hurry back to the training yard. The men are still practicing, though their movements have grown sluggish with fatigue. You call them to attention. Training is over for today, you announce. Report to the Great Hall immediately. We have new orders. Confusion shows on their faces, but they obey, setting aside practice weapons and moving toward the castle. You follow more slowly, mentally preparing what you'll tell them. The Great Hall is filling rapidly as word spreads. Knights, men-at-arms, servants, and castle officials gather. An undercurrent of tension running through the crowd. You make your way to the front where Roland is already waiting. Tomorrow, he says quietly as you join him. You may aren't ready. I know, you reply. But the Welsh don't care about our training schedule. Roland snorts. Fair point. When all your men have arrived, you raise your voice to address them. Listen well. The Welsh have crossed the border near Oswestry. The king commands all forces to Chester immediately. We march at first light tomorrow. A wave of muttering sweeps through the group. Some men look afraid, others excited, most simply resigned. War rarely conforms to convenient timetables. Check your equipment tonight, you continue. Anything broken or missing? Report to the armorer immediately. We travel light and fast. 1 pack per man, no more. Food for 5 days, water for 2. We'll resupply on the march. You outline the rest of the preparations. Where to gather in the morning? The order of march. Who reports to whom? The men listen attentively, aware that their lives may depend on remembering these details. Questions you ask when you finished. One of the younger soldiers raises his hand. Sir, what about our training? We've barely started. It's a valid concern and one that worries you as well, but there's no good answer. Training continues on the march, you say. And remember, the Welsh we're fighting aren't professional soldiers either. They're farmers and herders, just like many of you. They have the advantage of home ground, but we have better equipment and discipline. This isn't entirely true. Many Welsh fighters were quite skilled, but the men need confidence more than complete accuracy right now. Any other questions? When no one speaks, you nod decisively. Dismissed, be ready before dawn. As the men disperse, Roland approaches you again. I'm coming with you, he says. The Earl approved it just now. Relief washes through you. Roland is an experienced knight and a good friend. Having him along significantly improves your chances of success and survival. Thank you, you say simply. He claps you on the shoulder in response. Now comes the hardest part, telling Eleanor. You find her in the solar again, supervising the packing of trunks. She's already heard the news, of course. In a castle, word travels faster than fire. Tomorrow, she says when she sees you, her voice carefully neutral. Yes, there's nothing else to say. No explanation needed. No apology that would mean anything. Eleanor dismisses her ladies with a gesture, waiting until you're alone before speaking again. I've ordered your things packed. Thomas is overseeing it. Thank you. You move closer, taking her hands in yours. They're cold despite the relative warmth of the solar. I'll write when I can. She almost smiles at that. You both know how unlikely regular correspondence is. Messengers are few, roads dangerous, and campaigns chaotic. She might not hear from you for months, if at all. Just come back, she says quietly. That's all I ask. You draw her into an embrace, feeling the warmth of her body against yours. In this moment, the political nature of your marriage doesn't matter. She is your wife, the lady of your household, potentially the mother of your children, and tomorrow you might ride to your death. I will, you promise, though it's not a promise you can guarantee to keep. The rest of the day passes in a blur of preparations. You check and recheck equipment, confer with Roland about the march route, meet with the castle steward about supplies, and draft final orders for your men. Dinner that night is a somber affair. The Earl hosts a small feast for the departing knights, but there's little real celebration. Everyone understands the gravity of the situation and the dangers ahead. Eleanor sits beside you at table, elegant in her best gown. She plays the role of supportive wife perfectly, smiling at the appropriate moments, engaging in light conversation with other ladies, never showing the worry you know she feels. After dinner, the Earl calls for silence and raises his cup. To our brave knights, he says, his voice carrying across the great hall. May God grant you victory against the Welsh rebels and safe return to Pembroke. Victory and return. The assembly echoes, drinking deeply. You sip your wine, the taste bitter in your mouth despite its quality. How many men in this room will not return? How many will die in Welsh mountain passes or from disease in muddy camps or from infected wounds after battle? Medieval warfare was brutal and deadly. Even minor wounds could prove fatal without modern medicine. Disease claimed more lives than enemy weapons, and the Welsh mountains in autumn would be cold, wet, and inhospitable. The feast ends earlier than usual, everyone aware of the early departure tomorrow. You walk Eleanor back to your chamber in silence, both lost in your own thoughts. In the privacy of your room, you help each other undress, an intimacy normally handled by servants. But tonight, you want these moments together. Eleanor's fingers trace a scar on your shoulder, a memento from a previous campaign. You have too many of these, she murmurs. Not as many as some, you reply, thinking of knights who bear the marks of decades of warfare. If you survive long enough, your body, too, will become a map of old injuries and near-death experiences. You lie together in the darkness, not speaking much. Words seem inadequate for what might be a final night together. Instead, you hold each other, memorizing the feel of skin against skin, the rhythm of breath, the beat of heart against heart. Sleep comes reluctantly. Your mind too full of tomorrow's challenges. When you do drift off, your dreams are fragmented and uneasy. Broken shield walls, lost men, Welsh arrows raining from mountain passes. You wake before the matins bell, the castle still dark and quiet around you. Eleanor stirs as you rise, watching silently as you dress. "I'll come to the courtyard," she says as you buckle on your sword belt. "You don't need to," you reply. "It will be cold and early." She sits up, her silhouette barely visible in the pre-dawn darkness. "I'll come," she repeats more firmly this time. You nod, understanding. This goodbye matters whether anyone else witnesses it or not. Thomas arrives with a lamp, yawning, but alert. "The men are gathering, sir," he reports. Sir Roland asks if you'll break fast in the kitchen before departure. "Yes," you say. "Tell him I'll be there shortly." When Thomas leaves, you turn back to Eleanor, who is already rising and reaching for her clothing. "I'll meet you in the courtyard," you tell her, bending to kiss her forehead. "Don't rush." The kitchen is warm and busy despite the early hour, filled with servants preparing food for the departing soldiers. Roland is there tearing into a loaf of bread with his teeth. "Morning," he grunts around a mouthful. "Sleep well?" "Not particularly," you admit, accepting a chunk of bread and cheese from a passing cook. Roland shrugs. "Nobody does. Night before a campaign. Better get used to it." You eat quickly, washing down the simple food with ale. There's no time for more elaborate fare, nor would your churning stomach welcome it. Outside the courtyard is a scene of controlled chaos. Men check saddle girths and weapon straps by torchlight. Horses stamp and snort in the cold air. Servants rush about with last-minute provisions and messages. You find your destrier, your warhorse already saddled and waiting. The massive animal stands patiently as you check its tack, running your hands over leather straps and metal buckles. A knight's relationship with his horse is critical. In battle, your life depends on the animal's training and obedience. Gradually, order emerges from chaos. The men form ranks, mounted and on foot. Pack horses are loaded with supplies. Last-minute instructions are given and acknowledged. The eastern sky is just beginning to lighten when Eleanor appears at the edge of the courtyard. She's dressed simply but elegantly, her hair covered with a veil against the morning chill. You go to her leading your horse. "Safe journey," she says, her voice steady despite the emotion in her eyes. "Keep well," you reply. "I'll return as soon as I can." She nods, reaching up to touch your face one last time. "God with you, husband, and remain with you, wife." It's a formal exchange, proper for public viewing, but the hand on your cheek conveys what words cannot. You cover her hand with yours briefly, then step back and mount your horse. From the saddle, you look down at Eleanor, committing her face to memory. Then you turn away, guiding your destrier toward the front of the formation where Roland waits. "Ready?" he asks. You nod, taking a deep breath of the cold morning air. "Open the gates," you command, your voice ringing across the courtyard. The heavy wooden gates swing open, revealing the road beyond. The road to Wales, to war, perhaps to death, but there's no turning back now. The king commands, and you obey. "Forward," you call, and spur your horse into motion. Behind you, 20 men and Roland follow, leaving the relative safety of Pembroke Castle for the uncertainties of campaign. You don't look back at Eleanor. Knights' wives don't expect such sentimentality. Instead, you focus on the road ahead, already planning the day's march and the challenges to come. The medieval knight rides to war, as his kind has done for centuries, and will continue to do for centuries more. Whether he returns is in God's hands now. And in your modern bed, warm and safe, you shiver slightly at the thought of riding into battle with so little protection, so little certainty. The medieval world was a place of constant danger and precious little security. Perhaps we should be grateful for our modern comforts and safeguards, even as we romanticize the age of knights and chivalry. The first day's march is brutal. The road, if you can dignify it with such a name, is little more than a muddy track churned to slop by recent rains. Your destrier, bred for battle rather than comfortable travel, plods stoically through the muck, while less well-trained horses struggle and stumble. By midday, you've covered only 10 miles. A pitiful distance by modern standards, but respectable in medieval England, where 20 miles was considered a good day's journey, even in favorable conditions. We'll rest here, you announce, pointing to a small clearing beside the road. 1 hour, no more. The men dismount gratefully, wincing as stiff muscles protest. Even experienced riders feel the strain of hours in the saddle, especially when wearing mail armor. The foot soldiers have their own discomforts. Blisters from poorly fitted shoes, chafing from wet clothing, the constant weight of weapons and equipment. You confer with Roland while the men eat a cold meal of bread and dried meat. No fires will be lit during this brief stop. Smoke might attract unwanted attention, and time is too precious to waste. We should reach Cardigan by nightfall, Roland says, studying a crude map spread across his saddle. Maps in medieval times were more approximate suggestion than accurate representation, but this one shows the major towns and roads well enough. If the weather holds, you agree, glancing at the sky. The clouds are heavy and gray, threatening more rain. Another downpour would slow us considerably, Roland nods grimly. Let's pray it holds, then. I've no desire to sleep in mud tonight. Prayer might be your only recourse. Weather forecasting in the 13th century consisted primarily of looking at the sky and making educated guesses based on folk wisdom. No satellites, no radar, not even a barometer to warn of coming storms. The rest period ends all too quickly. You call the men back to formation, noting their reluctance with a mixture of sympathy and stern discipline. This is only the beginning of the hardships they'll face. Mount up, you command. We have many miles yet before Cardigan. The afternoon's journey proves even more arduous than the morning's. The road deteriorates further in places, becoming little more than a swampy track through dense woodland. The trees crowd close on either side, their branches reaching like gnarled fingers overhead, blocking what little daylight filters through the clouds. Keep alert, you warn the men as you enter a particularly narrow section. This would be an ideal place for an ambush. Though you're still well within English territory, bandits are a constant threat on medieval roads. Desperate men, outlaws, deserters, or simply the destitute, often turn to robbery to survive. A military company like yours presents a hard target, but not an impossible one. If the attackers have numbers and surprise on their side, every man's hand drifts to his weapon as you navigate the constricted passage. Eyes scan the underbrush for any sign of movement. The only sounds are the squelch of hooves in mud, the creak of leather, and the occasional jingle of mail or equipment. The tension is palpable, every sense heightened. This is another aspect of medieval travel rarely depicted in romantic tales. The constant vigilance, the ever-present threat of violence. You emerge from the woodland without incident. The road widening as it approaches more open country. The men relax slightly, though discipline keeps them from dropping their guard entirely. First time I've traveled this road, Roland comments, bringing his horse alongside yours. Didn't realize how forsaken it would be. Lesser used since the new route through Haverfordwest opened, you explain. Merchants prefer it. More towns for trading, better inns for stopping, and better for not getting your throat cut, Roland adds dryly. You smile despite yourself. Roland has a gift for cutting to the heart of matters. That, too. As afternoon wanes toward evening, you spot the walls of Cardigan in the distance. The town is enlarged by modern standards, perhaps 1,000 inhabitants, but it represents safety, supplies, and shelter after a long day's march. Look lively, you call to the men. We'll present ourselves properly as we enter. Appearances matter in medieval society. How you and your men comport yourselves reflects not just on you personally, but on your lord, the Earl of Pembroke. A disciplined, orderly entrance will earn respect. A ragged, disorganized one might prompt contempt or suspicion. The men straighten in their saddles or square their shoulders if on foot. Helmets are adjusted. Cloaks arranged more neatly. Weapons displayed prominently but not threateningly. Even exhausted after a day's hard travel, certain standards must be maintained. You reach the town gates just as they're preparing to close for the night. Medieval towns were rarely left open after dark, both for defense against attackers and to control who came and went. Who approaches calls the gate guard a burly man with a halberd, a combination spear and axe that could be devastating in trained hands. Sir William De Valognes, Knight of Pembroke with men bound for the King's service in Wales. You announce formally. The guard straightens at the mention of royal service. Enter and be welcome. The captain will want to speak with you. You nod acknowledgement and lead your company through the gate into the town proper. Cardigan streets are narrow and winding, packed dirt rather than cobblestone, lined with timber-framed buildings that lean precariously over the thoroughfare. The smell hits you immediately. A pungent mixture of human waste, animal dung, wood smoke, and the indefinable odor of too many people living in too small a space with too little sanitation. Christ's wounds, mutters Roland beside you. And I thought the forest stank. You suppress a smile. Find comfort where you can, old friend. It all smells the same in the dark. The town's inhabitants watch curiously as your company passes. Armed men are a common enough sight in a border town like Cardigan, but still worthy of attention. Children dash alongside for a few yards, pointing and chattering. Women pause in doorways, assessing the newcomers with practiced eyes. Men measure your equipment and bearing, judging your fighting worth and potential threat. The captain of the guard meets you in the town square, a veteran soldier with a weathered face and practical armor. Sir William, he greets you with a respectful nod. We received word you might pass through. The constable offers you and your officers lodging in the castle tonight. This is both courtesy and practical politics. As a knight in the king's service, you're entitled to certain considerations. The constable, the official in charge of the castle, demonstrates both his respect for your rank and his loyalty to the crown by extending this invitation. Please convey my thanks to the constable, you reply formally. My men, the inn can accommodate them, the captain says, gesturing to a substantial two-story building across the square, or they may camp outside the walls if you prefer. You consider briefly. The inn would be more comfortable, but costlier and potentially problematic if your men drink too much. A camp outside would be cheaper and keep them under better control, but leaves them vulnerable to the elements and potential trouble. The inn, you decide, but with restrictions. No excess drink, no whoring, no fighting. We march at first light. The captain nods, unsurprised by these sensible precautions. I'll assign 2 of my men to help maintain order. Much appreciated. You turn to Thomas, who has remained close by throughout the journey. See to the arrangements. Make sure every man knows the consequences of misbehavior. As Thomas hurries off to organize the men's lodging, you and Roland follow the captain toward the castle. It's a solid stone structure, not as grand as Pembroke, but impressive enough to control the surrounding countryside. Any word from the north? You ask, you walk. Border towns often receive news faster than official channels carried by merchants and travelers. Rumors only, the captain replies cautiously. They say the Welsh raided as far as Chirk, but were driven back with heavy losses. You exchange glances with Roland. This doesn't match the information that prompted your hasty departure from Pembroke. Either the captain is being discreet or the situation has changed since your last intelligence. We'll know more when we reach Chester, Roland says quietly. You nod in agreement. The constable greets you in the castle's great hall, a man of late middle age with the polished manners of minor nobility.
Sir William, Sir Roland, welcome to Cardigan.
You honor us with your presence. More formalities follow.
Introductions to the constable's wife and daughter, to his chaplain and steward, to various local worthies gathered for the evening meal. You play your part in this social dance, exchanging courtesies, accepting a cup of wine, complimenting the constable's hospitality. This, too, is part of a knight's duty, as important in its way as skill with sword or lance.
The battlefield isn't the only place where reputations are made or broken.
The courts and halls of the powerful matter just as much, perhaps more. You travel light for campaign, the constable observes as servants begin laying out the evening meal. No squires beyond your page, no personal servants.
Haste was required, you explain. We left much behind that might normally accompany us.
The constable nods, understanding, the Welsh grow bolder each year.
This latest rebellion tests even our good king's patience.
The conversation turns to politics, the situation in Wales, the king's response, the likely outcome of the campaign. You contribute carefully, aware that casual words from a knight can be interpreted as reflecting his lord's position or even the king's.
Medieval politics were a labyrinth of allegiances, obligations, and subtle signals.
A wrong word could damage not just your own standing, but that of your patron.
Discretion wasn't just advisable.
It was essential for survival at court.
Dinner proves better than you expected.
Fresh bread, a fish stew, roasted fowl, and even some late-season fruits. The wine is decent, though you drink sparingly, mindful of tomorrow's journey. Tell me, Sir William, says the constable's daughter, during a lull in conversation, is it true that knights in the king's service must swear to rescue any maiden in distress?
You nearly choke on your wine. Roland beside you coughs to hide his amusement. An interesting question, my lady, you reply diplomatically.
The oath of knighthood includes defending the weak and innocent, which certainly encompasses ladies in perilous situations, but there's no specific requirement about maidens in distress.
The girl looks disappointed. She's perhaps 16, at an age where romantic notions of knighthood hold particular appeal. Her father chuckles indulgently. You must forgive Matilda, he says.
She consumes too many French romances for her own good. There's no harm in admiring the ideals of chivalry, you say graciously, earning a grateful smile from the girl, but privately you reflect on the vast gap between those ideals and the reality of knighthood. The code of chivalry, as romanticized in stories, bore little resemblance to the practical code that governed knights' behavior. Yes, you swore to protect the weak, but primarily those under your lord's protection or within your own jurisdiction. Yes, you pledged to honor women, but that meant respecting noble ladies of your own class, not dashing about the countryside rescuing random damsels.
The real code of chivalry was more practical and considerably less romantic. Don't attack churches or clergy. Don't harm women of noble birth. Don't steal from those you're sworn to protect. Keep your word to equals. Serve your lord faithfully. These were the core principles focused more on maintaining order within the warrior class than on performing heroic deeds from minstrels' tales. I've always wondered, says the constable's chaplain, a thin man with scholarly hands, how knights reconcile their holy vows with the violence of their profession. Does it not trouble your conscience to take lives even in service to the crown? This is a more pointed question touching on genuine theological debates of the time. The Church's position on knightly violence had evolved over centuries, creating a complex framework that justified certain types of killing while condemning others. I serve the king who was anointed by God, you answer carefully. When I fight at his command against rebels or enemies of the realm, I act as an instrument of rightful authority. St. Augustine himself acknowledged that soldiers who kill in just war do not commit murder. The chaplain nods, seemingly satisfied with your orthodox response, but the question lingers in your mind, as it does for many thoughtful knights. Where is the line between duty and sin? Between necessary violence and mere brutality? These are not easy questions, even for men raised from childhood to the profession of arms. The meal concludes with a simple dessert of nuts and honey, followed by prayers led by the chaplain. As the gathering begins to disperse, the constable draws you and Roland aside. A word in private, if you please, he says, gesturing toward a small side chamber. Once the door closes behind you, the constable's manner changes.
Less the gracious host, more the sharp-eyed official. "What I'm about to share hasn't been widely circulated," he says in a low voice. "The Welsh attacks are more coordinated than initially reported. We believe they're testing defenses before a larger assault. This is troubling news." Isolated raids were common along the border. A coordinated campaign suggested planning and leadership that could pose a genuine threat.
"Do you know who leads them?" Roland asks. The constable shakes his head, reports conflict. "Some say it's Llywelyn's brother, others name various local chieftains, but the pattern suggests a single mind behind the separate actions." "And Chester, you ask, is the muster proceeding as ordered?"
"As far as I know," the constable confirms, "but you may find the situation changed when you arrive."
Messages travel slowly and plans change quickly in wartime. This too is a reality of medieval warfare.
Without rapid communication, military plans were always tentative, subject to change based on conditions on the ground. A commander might arrive at his destination only to find the situation entirely different from what he expected.
"Thank you for this information," you say sincerely.
"It may prove valuable in the days ahead."
The constable nods.
"I wish I could offer more concrete intelligence, but know this. The people in these parts are loyal to the crown. You'll find help if you need it." From Cardigan to Chester.
After a few more minutes of discussion, you take your leave, retiring to the chamber prepared for you.
It's simple but comfortable by medieval standards. A real bed with linens, a chest for your belongings, even a small brazier providing some warmth against the autumn chill. Roland, who will share the chamber, as is common for traveling knights, sits heavily on a bench and begins removing his boots. "Well," he says after a moment, "that was informative in its way indeed." You unbuckle your sword belt, setting the weapon within easy reach of the bed. Another habit of men who live with danger. The Welsh situation sounds more serious than we were led to believe.
Roland grunts agreement. Makes you wonder what else we haven't been told. This too is part of a knight's reality.
Navigating not just physical dangers, but political ones as well. Information is controlled, manipulated, sometimes deliberately withheld. Even as a knight in royal service, you're a piece on the chessboard, not a player.
You check on your men before settling in for the night, walking the short distance to the inn where they're quartered. The common room is crowded but orderly.
Your soldiers mingling with locals but maintaining reasonable discipline. You speak briefly with the sergeant you appointed to maintain order. Then return to the castle satisfied that no trouble will arise. Back in your chamber you find Roland already asleep, snoring softly on his side of the bed. Sharing beds was normal in medieval times even for high-ranking individuals.
Privacy as we understand it today simply didn't exist.
You remove your outer clothing but leave on your linen shirt and braised medieval underwear consisting of loose knee-length drawers. Climbing into bed, you pull the wool blanket up against the chill and try to quiet your mind for sleep.
Tomorrow will bring another long day of travel, drawing you closer to Chester and whatever awaits there.
The Welsh border, once distant, now looms in your thoughts, a line beyond which danger multiplies, and the familiar gives way to hostile territory. In your modern bed, with its memory foam mattress and climate-controlled comfort, you can scarcely imagine the reality of a medieval knight's existence.
The constant discomfort, the ever-present danger, the complex web of obligations and expectations all formed a life utterly unlike our protected, convenient modern experience.
Perhaps there's something to be said for that medieval directness, the clarity of purpose, the immediacy of experience, the close bond between comrades who face death together. But few modern people would willingly trade their comfortable existence for the harsh realities of a knight's life.
As sleep claims you, your last thought is of the journey ahead.
Both the fictional journey to Chester in your adopted persona of Sir William and your own journey through this exploration of medieval reality both promise challenges and revelations yet to come.
The next morning dawns grey and cold with a light drizzle that promises to make the day's travel even more miserable than yesterday's.
You rise before Roland, performing your ablutions with the minimal water provided in a small basin. Dental hygiene consists of rubbing your teeth with a rough cloth and rinsing with wine. A far cry from modern toothbrushes and fluoride paste, but better than nothing in an age where many simply allowed their teeth to rot. Going to be a wet one, Roland observes as he wakes and notes the sound of rain on the shuttered window. Better than snow, you reply pragmatically. It's early autumn, but in medieval England, winter could arrive suddenly and with deadly force.
Rain is uncomfortable.
Snow can be fatal, especially for an army on the march. You break your fast with bread, cheese, and ale in the castle's hall, joined by the constable, who offers final advice about the road ahead. Then it's time to gather your men and resume the journey northward. The town is barely stirring as your company forms up at the gate. Shopkeepers are just opening their stalls, apprentices hurrying to their masters' workshops, servants emptying night soil into the central gutter that runs down each street. The rain has intensified slightly, pattering on thatched roofs and forming puddles in the unpaved streets. Not much of a day for traveling, comments the gate guard as he swings the heavy wooden portal open for your departure.
No choice in the matter, you reply.
The king's business waits for no weather. The guard touches his cap respectfully.
Safe journey then, Sir Knight. You lead your company out onto the muddy road, already anticipating the long, wet hours ahead. This is the reality of medieval travel. Discomfort as a constant companion, relief as an occasional visitor. But you are a knight sworn to service, and the path ahead is clear, however arduous it may be. With a word of command and a gesture forward, you signal your signal to move. The journey into Wales has begun. The first few hours pass uneventfully as the column follows the Roman road heading west. The terrain is still relatively flat, the road reasonably well maintained.
Scattered farms and small villages appear occasionally, their inhabitants watching the passing army with expressions ranging from hope to dread. For these border people, the army represents both protection and potential danger.
Soldiers, even friendly ones, can be almost as destructive as enemies.
They don't look happy to see us, Roland observes as you pass through a particularly silent hamlet.
Would you be? You reply. Either we succeed and the fighting stays far from their homes, or we fail and they're directly in the path of a Welsh advance. Roland grunts acknowledgement. Fair point.
By midday, the landscape begins to change. The flat farmland gives way to rolling hills which gradually grow steeper and more rugged. The road narrows, hemmed in by increasingly dense woodland.
Perfect ambush country.
Scouts forward, you order, selecting 4 men to ride ahead and check the path.
200 yards, no further. If you see anything at all, report back immediately.
The scouts salute and move ahead at a trot, alert for any sign of danger. You turn to the rest of your vanguard. Shields ready, you command, archers, strings tightened, but bows undrawn.
We're entering hostile territory. The change in the men is immediate. Casual conversation ceases. Hands move to weapons. Eyes scan the surrounding hillsides and tree lines.
The column tightens formation, presenting a more unified target, but also a more defensible one.
Ree becomes noticeably tenser as well.
We cross into Wales soon, he murmurs, pointing to a small stream ahead.
That water marks the border. Border is a generous term for the fluid boundary between England and Wales.
No walls or gates mark the transition, just a change in jurisdiction from lands under direct English control to territories claimed by Welsh princes or English marcher lords. The column halts briefly at the stream, allowing men and horses to drink.
Mortimer rides forward to confer with you and the other vanguard leaders. From here we're in disputed territory, he says without preamble. The Welsh could be anywhere. Maximum vigilance. You nod understanding.
The terrain grows more difficult ahead, my lord. The column will need to narrow.
Unavoidable.
Maintain intervals sufficient for defense, but not so wide as to invite isolation.
This is the constant balance in medieval warfare.
Staying close enough to support each other, but not so tightly packed that a single attack could devastate multiple units. In mountain country, this balance becomes even more critical and more difficult to maintain. The march resumes with heightened tension. The road narrows further, forcing the column to thin to no more than 3 men abreast in places. The hills on either side grow steeper, the forest denser.
Perfect territory for the guerrilla tactics favored by Welsh fighters. An hour past the border. Your scouts return at a gallop.
Riders ahead, sir, reports the lead scout, his face flushed with exertion.
Small group, maybe 10.
They watched us from a ridge, then disappeared into the trees.
Welsh, you ask, though the answer seems obvious.
Yes, sir. Carrying spears and round shields. You relay this information to Mortimer, who has again ridden forward upon seeing the returning scouts.
Observers, Mortimer concludes, tracking our progress.
Or leading us into a trap, Roland suggests darkly.
Mortimer nods. Both are likely. Proceed, but with extra scouts on the flanks.
I want to know if they're paralleling our movement.
The column pushes deeper into Welsh territory.
The road begins to climb more steeply, switchbacking up hillsides and through narrow valleys. Progress slows as men and horses struggle with the terrain.
By late afternoon, you've covered perhaps 15 miles from Chester. A decent march by medieval standards, especially in such country.
We should make camp soon, you advise Mortimer as the daylight begins to fade.
Night marches in this terrain would be foolhardy. Agreed. Find a defensible position within the next hour.
This is easier said than done in country that favors the defender at every turn. Eventually, Ree indicates a relatively flat area beside a small lake with hills on only two sides instead of all around. Best we'll find before dark, he says simply. The column halts and begins the complex process of establishing a medieval military camp. Perimeter guards are posted, tents erected, horses picketed, and cooking fires lit.
The organization is impressive for its time. Medieval armies might lack modern technology, but they possessed effective systems born of centuries of practical experience.
You establish your command post near the center of camp where you can respond quickly to threats from any direction. Thomas helps you remove your heavier armor, though you keep your gambeson on and weapons close at hand.
In hostile territory, a knight never truly relaxes. Roland joins you as you study a crude map spread on a camp table.
Scouts report movement on the western ridge, he says without preamble. Small groups keeping their distance, watching us, you conclude, counting our numbers, assessing our readiness, and probably reporting to a larger force almost certainly.
You trace the route ahead on the map. Tomorrow we enter proper mountain country. If they're going to attack in force, that's where they'll do it. Roland nods grimly.
The men should rest while they can. Then you agree, but rest proves elusive for many, including yourself.
The night is filled with the normal sounds of a medieval camp.
Men talking in low voices, horses nickering, sentries calling challenges, but underneath runs a current of tension that prevents true relaxation. Sometime past midnight, a commotion erupts at the perimeter. You're awake and armed within seconds, rushing toward the disturbance with Roland and several other knights close behind.
What happened?
You demand of the sentry, who stands with bow drawn, peering into the darkness beyond the camp.
Movement in the trees, sir, the man reports.
Several figures they withdrew when challenged. Probing our defenses, Roland suggests, or trying to rattle us, you counter. Either way, double the sentries for the remainder of the night. No further incidents occur, but few in the camp manage much sleep afterward. By dawn, the army is tired, but alert, aware that the day ahead may bring direct confrontation with the enemy.
The column forms up in the gray morning light. Armor and weapons checked one final time before the march resumes. The mood is somber, focused.
These men have faced danger before.
They know what might lie ahead. Stay close to me, you instruct Ree as you mount your destrier.
If we're attacked, get down and seek cover immediately.
You're no use to us dead.
The Welsh guide nods understanding, his face betraying the fear he's trying to conceal.
He didn't sign up for direct combat.
His role was supposed to be guidance only.
But in war, especially medieval war, roles often change without warning.
The march begins again, the column snaking its way upward into increasingly mountainous terrain. The road, barely deserving the name now, winds through steep-sided valleys and across exposed ridgelines. In places it narrows to little more than a goat track, forcing men to proceed in single file, a situation no commander welcomes in hostile territory. This is bad country for heavy cavalry, Roland observes as you navigate a particularly treacherous section.
It's a significant observation.
Knights on horseback were the medieval battlefield's most formidable force, but their effectiveness depended on suitable terrain.
In these mountains, that advantage is largely neutralized. We fight dismounted if necessary, you reply.
Not ideal, but better than being caught on horseback in narrow passes.
The morning passes intense vigilance, but no attack materializes.
By noon, the column has entered a broader valley with a swift-flowing river on one side and steep forested slopes on the other.
The terrain offers slightly better movement, but remains fraught with danger. Hold.
Rhys suddenly raises his hand, his body tense.
Something's wrong.
You signal the column to halt, scanning the surroundings for any sign of threat.
What is it?
Too quiet, the guide says, his voice barely above a whisper.
No birds, no animals.
He's right, you realize with a jolt of alarm. The natural sounds of the forest have ceased entirely. In medieval warfare, this silence often preceded an ambush.
Shields, you command, your voice carrying down the line. Form defensive positions. The order comes not a moment too soon. From the forested slope, a volley of arrows arcs toward the column, followed by the battle cries of Welsh warriors charging down the hillside.
What follows is chaos.
The controlled chaos of medieval combat,
where training and discipline mean the difference between life and death. Your men react as they've been drilled to do, forming shield walls where the terrain allows, using trees and rocks as cover where it doesn't. Archers return fire toward the treeline while swordsmen and spearmen prepare to meet the charging Welsh.
This is the reality of medieval battle. Not the choreographed justs of Hollywood, but a desperate, brutal struggle for survival. Knights fight alongside common soldiers. All distinctions of rank temporarily forgotten in the shared goal of staying alive.
You find yourself at the center of a knot of men, roaring commands that barely carry over the din of combat. Your shield deflects an arrow, then another. Around you, men cry out in pain or defiance as the Welsh close to melee range. The first warrior to reach you carries a spear and round shield. Typical Welsh equipment, lighter than English armor, but allowing greater mobility. He lunges with skill born of lifetime practice.
The spear point seeking the gap between your mail and helmet. Your shield intercepts the thrust.
The impact jarring your arm to the shoulder. You counter with a sword swing that the Welshman blocks with his own shield.
The blow splintering the wood but not penetrating. For several seconds you exchange attacks and parries, each seeking an opening in the other's defense.
This close-quarters combat is exhausting, especially in armor. Your breathing grows labored, sweat stinging your eyes despite the cool mountain air.
Finally, an opportunity presents itself. The Welshman overextends slightly on a thrust.
You step inside his reach, too close for his spear to be effective, and drive your sword up under his raised arm where no shield can protect.
The blade finds its mark, piercing cloth and flesh.
The man gasps, his eyes widening in shock and pain. You withdraw the sword with a practiced twist, already turning to face the next threat as your opponent crumples to the ground. There's no time for thought or remorse.
Medieval combat allowed no such luxuries.
Another attacker takes the fallen man's place, then another. Around you, similar struggles play out as the battle engulfs the entire column. William Rowland's voice cuts through the chaos.
Left flank is failing.
You turn to see a section of your line buckling under concentrated Welsh pressure.
Without hesitation, you move toward the threatened area, gathering men as you go. With me, you command, your voice carrying authority that compels obedience even in the midst of battle. A dozen men follow as you drive toward the weakened flank.
Your arrival helps stabilize the position. Your presence and combat skill inspiring the beleaguered defenders.
The Welsh attack falters, then recedes as suddenly as it began.
Fighters melting back into the forest from which they emerged. As the immediate danger passes, you begin to assess the situation.
The entire engagement lasted perhaps 20 minutes.
An eternity in combat terms, but barely a footnote in historical records. Yet in those minutes lives were irrevocably changed or ended. Casualties, you ask the nearest sergeant trying to catch your breath.
8 dead that I can see, sir. Many more wounded. It could have been worse. Much worse.
But the loss still stings.
These were your men under your command. Their lives. Your responsibility. Secure the perimeter, you order. They may attack again. Get the wounded to the center of the column. Medieval battlefield medicine was primitive by modern standards, but not entirely ineffective.
The army travels with surgeons, usually monks with practical experience rather than formal training, who can clean and bind wounds, set broken bones, and even perform amputations when necessary.
You find Mortimer with blood. Whether his own or someone else's is unclear. An opening probe, he says, when you report the situation on your flank, testing our resolve. Successfully repelled, you add, but they'll be back, likely in greater numbers. Mortimer nods grimly. We push on as soon as the wounded attended. Staying in place invites a larger attack. This is sound medieval strategy.
A moving force presents a more difficult target than a stationary one, especially in terrain that favors the defender.
The column resumes its march within the hour.
Wounded men carried on improvised stretchers or helped by their comrades if able to walk. The dead are buried in shallow graves, a hasty but necessary measure when an army must keep moving.
Brief prayers are offered. Possessions collected to return to families if possible.
The remainder of the day passes without further attack, but the tension never eases. Every man knows the Welsh are out there watching, waiting for another opportunity. By nightfall, the column reaches a more defensible position, a natural bowl in the mountains with steep sides on 3/4 of its circumference.
We camp here, Mortimer decides. Double perimeter, no fires except for the wounded. Cold camps were common in medieval warfare when in hostile territory. Fire meant light, and light made you visible to enemies. Better to endure a cold meal and colder night than invite attack. As darkness falls, you make your rounds of the perimeter, checking defenses and speaking with the men. Morale has suffered after the day's fighting, but not broken. These are professional soldiers accustomed to the realities of medieval warfare. Death is always near. Survival never guaranteed. Around midnight, you're relieved by another night and finally return to your tent.
Thomas has arranged your camp bed, a simple cot raised slightly off the ground with blankets that smell of wood smoke and horse.
It's far from comfortable by modern standards, but to your exhausted body, it's welcoming enough. Sleep comes quickly, but remains light. Your mind alert even in rest for any sign of danger. This too was the reality for medieval warriors. The ability to snatch rest when possible while maintaining a level of awareness that could mean the difference between life and death. You wake before dawn, roused by changing of the guard outside. Your body aches from yesterday's exertions. Old wounds and new injuries protesting as you rise and don your armor with Thomas's assistance. Medieval knights didn't have the luxury of recovery time during campaigns. You fought while injured, each new hurt adding to the collection until battle, disease, or age finally claimed you. Outside the camp is stirring as men prepare for what all expect to be a day of battle. Cooking fires glow in their deep pits. The smell of porridge. Simple filling campaign food filling the air. Knights gather in small groups discussing strategy or simply enjoying a moment of camaraderie before the killing begins again. You find Mortimer with his captain studying a crude map spread on a camp table before him. He looks up as you approach, his expression grim but determined. Scouts report the Welsh have moved during the night, he says without greeting. They've split their force, half circling south, half north. They're trying to flank us. It's a sound strategy on their part, forcing you to divide your defense or risk being surrounded. But Mortimer has anticipated this move. We break camp within the hour, he continues. March west along the river here. He traces the route on the map. Let them think they're hurting us where they want, but we'll choose the ground for the main engagement. This is medieval generalship at its most effective. Reading the enemy's intentions, appearing to react predictably while actually maneuvering toward advantage. It's a chess game played with hundreds of lives where a single miscalculation can mean disaster. The camp dismantles with practiced efficiency. By the time the sun crests the eastern ridge, the column is already moving westward along the narrow valley. scouts ranging ahead into the flanks to provide warning of enemy movement.
You ride near the front again, your battered body protesting each jolt and sway of your destrier. Around you, men march stoically despite injuries and exhaustion. The medieval soldier endured hardships that would break most modern people, not from any greater innate toughness, but from lifelong conditioning to a world where comfort was rare and suffering expected. The valley gradually widens as you proceed west, the river bending southward. By mid-morning you reach the position Mortimer has selected for his stand. A broad meadow backed by a low cliff with the river protecting one flank and a steep wooded slope the other. It's defensible ground allowing formation of proper battle lines while minimizing the Welsh ability to use their superior mobility.
We make our stand here. Mortimer announces battle array. Knights and men-at-arms in the center.
Archers on the flanks. Reserve force behind the line under Sir William's command.
You're surprised by this assignment.
Command of the reserve is a position of trust, but removes you from the initial fighting. When you question Mortimer privately, his answer is blunt.
You've proven your courage amply these past days, he says. Now, I need your judgment.
The reserve must be committed at the right moment, not too early or too late.
I trust you to make that determination. It's a heavy responsibility.
The reserve often determine the outcome of medieval battles, turning potential defeat into victory if used wisely, or ensuring disaster if squandered. The army forms its battle line with the discipline of long training. Banners are raised, including the royal standard at the center, where Mortimer takes personal command.
Priests move along the ranks offering hasty blessings and last rites to those who request them. This too was part of medieval combat, the acknowledgement that many would not survive the day and the preparation of souls for that possibility. You position your reserve force on a slight rise behind the main line where you can observe the entire battlefield. The men under your command, 100 knights and experienced men-at-arms, remain mounted, ready to respond quickly to developing threats. The wait is not long.
By noon, Welsh warriors appear at the western end of the meadow, emerging from the forest in larger numbers than expected. Their advance is cautious at first, probing, assessing the English formation. They know they've lost the element of surprise, Roland observes, riding up beside you.
But they still outnumber us. Numbers aren't everything, you reply. Though the Welsh advantage is concerning, they're committed now.
If we break their charge, they have nowhere to retreat except back up difficult terrain. The Welsh continue to gather at the forest edge, their forces swelling visibly.
Banners appear among them.
The red dragon of Welsh princes along with the personal standards of various chieftains. Their formation is looser than the English line, more a gathering of war bands than a unified army, but no less dangerous for that lack of rigid structure. Finally, with a great shout that carries across the meadow, they charge.
Medieval battles often began this way. A surge of bodies across open ground. Each side hoping to break the other through sheer momentum and shock. The Welsh advance is swift, their lighter equipment allowing greater speed than the armored English knights and men-at-arms. The English line holds firm as the distance closes. Spears braced, shields locked. Archers on the flanks release volley after volley. Their arrows arcing high before plunging into the advancing Welsh ranks.
Men fall, but the charge continues unbroken.
The armies meet with an audible crash, the sound of wood splintering, metal striking metal, men shouting in triumph or pain. From your position with the reserve, you can see the English line bend under the impact but not break. Training and discipline hold them together against the Welsh fury. For long minutes, the battle hangs in balance. The Welsh press hard against the center, seeking to split the English force while Mortimer commits his knights to shore up threatened sections. It's a swirling, chaotic affair. Individual combats merging into a collective struggle for survival and victory. Then you see it. A movement in the trees to the north. A fresh Welsh force emerging to strike at the English flank. This is the moment you've been positioned to counter. Reserve with me, you command, raising your sword.
The northern flank. Your 100 mounted men respond instantly, wheeling toward the new threat. The advantage of horseback is speed and impact, qualities perfectly suited to counter the flanking maneuver before it can fully develop. You lead the charge personally, as expected of a medieval commander. Your destrier thunders across the meadow, hooves tearing up clouds of earth around you.
Your men keep formation despite the gallop. Lances lowered to present a wall of steel points to the emerging Welsh. The impact is devastating.
Your charge catches the Welsh force before it can properly deploy, smashing into their exposed flank with the full weight of horses and armored men.
Lances pierce shields and bodies, driving deep into the Welsh formation before breaking.
Without pausing, knights draw swords to continue the slaughter. The flanking maneuver collapses under this counterattack. Welsh warriors falling back in disorder towards the protective tree line. You press the advantage, driving them further back, ensuring they cannot regroup to threaten the main battle. By the time you pull your men back into formation, the situation on the main field has shifted dramatically. With the flanking threat neutralized, Mortimer has committed his personal guard to a push at the center of the Welsh line.
The momentum has swung to the English.
The Welsh falling back across the meadow in increasing disorder. Medieval battles often turned this way, a tipping point where one side's cohesion failed, transforming an organized fighting force into individual men seeking safety. Once begun, such collapse was nearly impossible to reverse. You lead your reserve force back toward the main battle. But it's already clear the day is won. The Welsh retreat has become a rout. Men fleeing into the forest, pursued by mounted knights. Banners that proudly led the charge now lie trampled in the bloodied grass. The aftermath of battle is never glorious. The meadow is strewn with dead and wounded from both sides. The survivors moving among them to offer aid to friends or deliver mercy strokes to dying enemies. Medieval medicine could save some. Those with clean wounds to extremities might survive if infection didn't set in. But many injuries were beyond help. You dismount, handing your horse's reins to your squire, and walk through the carnage to report to Mortimer. The commander stands near the center of the field, his armor dented and blood-spattered, but his person apparently unwounded. Well timed, he says simply as you approach. The reserve turned the day. The men fought well, you reply, deflecting personal praise as was customary among knights. Welsh casualties heavy. Their main force is scattered. Prisoners report Llywelyn himself was not present. This was a subordinate command. This explains much. Without their principal leader, the Welsh lacked the cohesion to press their numerical advantage effectively. It's a significant victory, though not the decisive engagement that might end the rebellion. We've bloodied them, Mortimer continues. Now we secure this valley and await reinforcement from the northern column. The campaign continues, but we've gained valuable ground today. The rest of the day passes in the grim business that follows battle. Wounded are tended. Dead are buried in mass graves. Equipment is recovered and repaired where possible. Medieval armies couldn't afford to linger long on battlefields. Disease would quickly take more lives than combat if proper sanitation wasn't established. By evening, a new camp has been constructed at the eastern end of the meadow, away from the worst of the day's fighting. Sentries are posted, though an immediate Welsh counterattack seems unlikely given their losses. For the first time in days, men relax slightly. The immediate danger past, if not the overall threat. You sit outside your tent as darkness falls, finally allowing yourself to feel the full extent of your exhaustion. Every muscle aches, old wounds throb with renewed vigor, and the emotional toll of combat weighs as heavily as physical fatigue. Roland joins you, passing a wineskin that contains something considerably stronger than the usual campaign fare. From Mortimer's personal stores, he explains with a weary smile. He thought we deserved it. You take a grateful swallow, the fiery liquid warming you from within. We were lucky today. Luck, skill, and good leadership, Roland corrects. Though I won't argue with any divine assistance we might have received as well. This blend of practical assessment and religious acknowledgement was typical of medieval knights, men who lived by their martial skills, but also believed sincerely in divine providence. Victory was earned through training and courage, but ultimately granted by God. As night deepens, the camp grows quieter. Men seek what comfort they can find in this harsh environment. Many sleeping where they sit rather than making the effort to reach their tents. The wounded moan softly despite doses of medieval painkillers, alcohol primarily, perhaps with extracts of poppy for the worst cases. You retire to your tent eventually, where Thomas has prepared your cot and laid out cleanish clothes for tomorrow. The boy looks dead on his feet, having spent the day helping with the wounded after ensuring your own equipment was properly maintained.
Get some rest, you tell him kindly. You've earned it as much as any fighting man. Left alone, you remove your armor with practiced movements. Each piece carefully set aside for cleaning and repair tomorrow.
The padded gambeson beneath is sweat-soaked and stained, but you have no energy to change. You simply collapse onto the cot, your sword within reach as always.
Sleep comes almost instantly. Your exhausted body surrendering to the absolute need for recovery.
In this moment, the night's concerns, duty, honor, survival, fade into temporary oblivion to return with the dawn and whatever new challenges it brings. In your modern bed, far from medieval dangers, you might wonder how those knights endured the constant proximity to violent death.
Perhaps they simply had no choice.
It was the world they knew, the life they were trained for from childhood.
Or perhaps humans are more adaptable than we credit, capable of finding normality even in circumstances we would consider unbearable.
Either way, as you drift towards sleep, you carry with you a deeper appreciation for the realities behind the romantic myths of knighthood. The fear, the pain, the difficult decisions, and the heavy responsibilities that shaped these men's lives in ways our comfortable modern existence can barely comprehend. Sleep well, safe in your modern comfort, while dreams perhaps carry you back to that harsher time, but only as a visitor, free to return to the present when morning comes.